Each of us knows that no one lives forever. We know that our time is limited, but it's easy to believe that we have plenty of time left. But life can change in an instant. Today, we're going to hear from a woman who lost someone to a tragic and slow illness when she was only 13 years old. The person she lost was not only her best friend, but was also her little brother, John. She and her brother were born only 18 months apart, and they did everything together. John was happy, active, an energetic child who loved to run around and play with his siblings, but John was particularly close to his big sister, Jennifer. The family had no idea that before John reached his 11th birthday, everything would change. If there's anything we've learned in the last few years, it's how quickly our lives can be turned upside down. We've learned that there are things we can't control. One thing we can't control is death. We don't get to know when it's our turn to leave this earth. What's even worse, we can't stop our loved ones from dying. We don't know when it's the last time we will see them, when it's the last hug we will ever share, the last word we will ever speak to them, or that they will speak to us. Have you ever wondered, why me? Why is this happening to my family? Have you ever had someone in your life you thought you couldn't live without, and then they were gone? Sometimes death takes its time, and sometimes death takes a life in an instant. If you have experienced either one of these, you may have asked yourself how you could possibly go on. I'm Teresa Harding, and today we're going to hear from a woman who experienced not one, but both of these types of death with family members she loved. She lost her brother to a slow and terrible death when she was only 13 years old. You would think she'd had her share of hardship, but no. Years later, she lost her father. One day he was there, the next he wasn't. Please welcome Jennifer. I really asked her if she would share her story because I think we're in a time right now where people feel alone and a lot of times people are going through things and it's hard to feel like there's anyone else who's going through something like them. And so we end up kind of getting inside of ourselves and feeling like no one understands. And maybe no one can truly understand because everyone's situation is just a little bit different. But I know that Jen's story will resonate with many of you. The purpose of us meeting today is to help anyone who might be going through something difficult, that this will lift you and it will help you with some of the things that Jennifer has learned. So I'm excited and I'm so grateful that you came because it's very vulnerable to share some of the things that I'm going to ask. And so I've told Jennifer, you can not answer any question you don't want to answer. And she said, I'm totally fine answering any question. So you had some tragic losses in your family. So can you tell us about, you lost your brother, you lost your father. So why don't you tell us what happened with your brother since that happened first?
Okay. So when I was 11, my brother, who is exactly 13 months younger than me, so we were really close, he started just acting weird and, we didn't know what was going on. Just
Acting
weird
weird,
things
like how?
like it started out honestly first just like zoning out. Like, how sometimes people daydream and you catch yourself doing that. And
Yeah, and you kind of have to say, hey,
Yeah,
I was talking
yeah,
to you. Yeah. Okay, I see.
But so it started out as that, but then eventually within just a short time, he started having seizures. And that was really scary.
Were they like the grand mal?
Seizures. Yeah. So
Scary.
that was really scary. And this was many, many years ago.
Because you were 11 when it started.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was 11. So this was like in 1982, 81-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we lived in a small community in northern Utah. And so to get the resources and the help, we had to travel. My parents had to travel at least an hour away to the hospital.
Just to even get to the
Yeah,
doctor.
because the hospital by us just didn't really know what to do or what was going on.
They didn't really even know what to do with a seizure, or was it because?
Well, they gave anti-seizure medication.
Okay.
But there had to be a cause.
You're
right?
trying to find out what's the
Yes,
reason.
yeah.
Okay.
So eventually they found out that he had a brain tumor. And that was really scary.
And that was in the 80s.
Yeah.
They know how to do
Yeah.
a lot more now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that was really scary because even with surgery, whenever you're messing with the brain, there's always risks of complications and making things worse than the seizures, right?
Yeah, and you don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so makes the decision, do we do something about it or not?
Mm-hmm.
It can life or death,
Right.
basically.
Yeah. So he went in and had his first surgery, and then they determined that it was cancerous. It was a malignant brain tumor.
And how big was it?
At the time, I think it was only the size of a golf ball.
And where was it in the brain?
I don't remember for sure, but it was in like the epicenter. They were really concerned about the surgery affecting different parts of
His
bodily
abilities.
functions.
Oh,
Yeah. Because
okay.
of that. So they did the surgery and, got out what they could. And at that, doing the surgery, they didn't know yet if it was cancerous or not until they actually brought the tumor out and tested it.
Okay.
And so then they advised doing radiation and chemotherapy, which back then was a lot different too, very harsh.
The side effects today
yeah.
are bad enough, but the side effects then were much worse.
Yeah. But he was 10 when this whole thing started, and he was very optimistic and cheerful through the whole thing. I don't remember him ever complaining about anything.
So what were you feeling? You're his sister, just barely older than him. There was no in between you, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
That would have been very close. But what were you feeling? Do you remember your feelings?
My feelings at that time were very concerned, obviously, for him.
Did you understand how serious it was at that age?
Yeah, just because cancer.
Yeah, that word is just scary.
Especially back then, cancer was never a good word.
Things have almost improved. Felt like a death sentence.
Yeah.
Right.
So I remember feeling at that time that, the doctors would do what they could, but I remember feeling like, because of my faith and what I believed, that it had to be in God's hands.
Right.
Because I just felt like the doctors alone would not be able to take care of this.
Did you feel like you didn't know what the doctors could do, or did you feel like it's too much for them?
Yeah, more like it was too much for them because of the size of it and because it was cancerous. And then even once they found the tumor and continued to monitor it, even after the surgery, like it was a rapidly growing tumor. So,
and at this point, did you feel like you felt like it was in God's hands? Did you feel like he's going to be okay?
Yeah, I remember my first feelings were, if I and my family as a whole, we have a big extended family, have enough faith and unite that faith together, that I knew God could heal him, right? Like at that young age, I knew that.
Wow. That's powerful that at that age, you felt that kind of faith.
Yeah. Looking back, I think the part that was missing was not taking God's will into account. Right.
So you were feeling like if we have enough faith, then he has to get better.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And don't we do that?
Yeah.
We do that a lot because we don't like the answer that might be the one we don't like, or we just can't even imagine the outcome that is not the one we like.
Yeah.
So
for sure. Yeah. And being the oldest, so I'm the oldest, and at that time I had 5 younger brothers. He was the first one during this whole process.
So there was you, your brother, and then 4 other boys. Okay. So during the process, how long was
it? Was sick? A 2-year process of, discovering what was wrong, and then the first surgery, the radiation, chemotherapy, then the tumor was back. And so they wanted to do a second surgery.
Right.
And through the whole radiation and chemotherapy, like he lost his hair and
Completely bald.
yeah, except for it was funny, he had like a ring of hair at the base of his neck.
Like kind of like a grandpa.
Like a grandpa hairdo. And he was in elementary school, but even that, he laughed. He thought it was so funny that he had a grandpa hairdo. And
do you think he really was happy? Did he ever have hard times that felt like you guys were worried that his energy was down?
Oh yeah. That's the other thing about this brother is that from birth, he was just had so much energy and was just go, go, go. Like he did everything early. I think he rolled over at less than a week old.
Oh my goodness.
It was almost
that's
like
early.
He knew he had a short time to live as much as
he had to hurry.
He did everything really early. So just full of energy.
Was he involved in a lot of sports or activities or
played soccer? We lived on a big farm, and so we just had acres and acres of land that we just were always running around. And he had traps. He trapped muskrats. I mean, we just we spent a lot of time just outside.
Okay.
Just exploring. And
so here you have these memories with your brother.
Yeah.
And now, so when he was going through chemotherapy and radiation,
that was hard to see him just laying there, right?
So he
just
didn't really have energy to get up.
Yeah, for a while. And then he would rebound, after a couple of days of between each treatment, and never got back to his full energetic self, but definitely still wanted to do things. And
did you feel okay? So the second surgery, how far in the process was that?
I don't remember details exactly how far in the process that was, but the doctors just said that's, obviously the radiation chemotherapy didn't work like we hoped it would.
Right.
But we're confident if we do another surgery that will help.
Okay.
And so they did the other surgery, and that one he ended up being in a coma for several weeks in the hospital, and not knowing if he would ever wake up from it, because they didn't know what damage they might have done during the surgery.
So they didn't even know what kind of brain capabilities he had.
Yeah.
Did you at all feel like he was there, he was in there in his body, or did you know?
I think at that time I should have done a better job, I guess, of trying to get details straight, but I'm pretty sure that it was right before that second surgery that my mom had another baby. And so he had that surgery. And
so now there are 7 kids. And baby, was it a boy or a girl?
Boy.
Another boy. So you're the oldest of 6 brothers.
Yes. And so for my mom to be able to still nurse the baby, who was just less than 6 months old, but still be at the hospital with her son that is in a coma, they pulled me out of school for a while, and I stayed with an aunt and uncle who lived close by.
Close to where the hospital
was.
So what grade were you in?
6th, maybe, or 7th. I don't remember.
So that's a lot of responsibility for us. So
I would take care of him all day and all night, and they would take me and the baby to the hospital so that she could feed him, and then we'd come back home to their house. So.
And so how were your parents dealing with this?
It was hard on my parents. I know my dad had to try to still keep working. So it was mainly my mom just staying at the hospital. And because
he has 7 kids, he's got to provide for the family.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
And the big extended family helped out a lot with taking care of the other boys at home, and getting
how did everybody get to school or get to places where they needed
I'm sure my grandparents
helped
out with that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so was your mom at the hospital very much?
Yeah.
With the baby. So
she
why
would
did
stay
you
at
need
the
to bring the
hospital
baby
the whole time with my brother? And I would just take the baby over for her to feed him and then go back to my
Oh,
aunt and uncle's
wow.
house.
And you would take care of the baby most of the time. So
Yeah.
you were almost like a surrogate
Yeah.
mom.
Yeah.
What did you feel about that at the time? Because our
Yeah.
perspectives change as we grow older and we start to learn a lot, and
Yeah.
we change our perspective.
I
but
loved it because that's from
Really?
the moment I can remember. I always want to be a mom. You know,
And that's
so-
your favorite thing. That is her favorite thing, is raising her kids and being with her kids.
Yeah. So for me, it was not a sacrifice.
It didn't feel like a
Mm-mm.
sacrifice at all.
Mm-mm.
Wow. And that wouldn't be like, that would feel like a sacrifice for a lot of kids that age.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just what I knew this is what I needed to do to help
Right.
out my family. And it really did not feel like a sacrifice. It felt like this is something I can do to help.
So what would you say to someone? Because I am sure there are people who are going to be watching this who are feeling like, well, for me, it did feel like a sacrifice. So then that's hard not to compare and feel like, well, I'm not as good as that because I did resent it or I did feel. What would you say to someone?
That we are all so different, and we all have things that come naturally and easy to us and things that are harder and take effort and work. And I think feel your feelings is important. That's taken me, I think that's probably one of the things that has been it still is a process I'm learning, but to really feel your feelings and give them a chance to manifest themselves in you.
Tell me how you've been working on this. Tell me how, because a lot of people will be thinking, but how? Like, I want to, but I don't know how.
I think the biggest thing that I did was labeled feelings, like I shouldn't be feeling this, or do you know what I mean? Like that's selfish, or that's unkind. And every emotion, every feeling can teach us something if we let it. So instead of I shouldn't be feeling this way, asking, why am I feeling this way? Right.
Yeah.
And then sitting and pondering in that thought, why am I feeling this way?
And taking that, wow, that's really, really powerful. And so sitting in that feeling, and then I almost hesitate to say this because you don't want to hurry through that part.
No.
Take time to feel that feeling.
Yeah.
Like, why am I feeling this way? And then again, take time. But then after you've really felt it and let yourself grieve or feel anger or whatever it is that you're feeling, then think, what am I learning from this?
Right. And that's just it. Everything can teach us if we are open to being taught. Right. And also life is a journey, and just like we feel like maybe we've learned something. And so then for me, I'll speak for myself, like personally, well, I've already learned that. I don't need to go through that again, right?
I have totally felt that so many times. And then something comes up and I think, I thought I already learned that. I thought I had that down.
Yeah. And that's not what life is. Like, life isn't just a continual.
Okay, quit. I don't like this. I don't. Dang it. Okay.
You know, like it is. It's hills and valleys. It's roller coasters. And every single thing can teach us. Right? We're not supposed to be happy all the time. If we're happy all the time, how do we know what that is if we're never sad?
That would be actually pretty boring.
Yeah. Yeah. So every single experience, feeling, emotion can all teach us something if we're open to it.
So did you ever feel angry?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Because I think that is a very normal feeling. But the hard part is how to deal with it. So first, tell me what were you angry at? Who were you?
So I told you at the beginning that I felt like if I personally, and then our family as a whole, had enough faith that God could heal my brother. Like, I knew that. I had no doubts. And looking back, that's surprising for me to think that as an 11-year-old, but I knew that. And so then when, like, after the second surgery, and he was in a coma for a while, and then he did wake up from that, but was paralyzed on the left side of his body. So he had to learn everything, how to talk, how to swallow, how to walk. They didn't think he'd ever walk again, but he did
Wow.
learn how to walk, kind of like dragging his foot.
Okay.
His left arm, he would always have to lift it up with his other hand to move it around. But
Wow.
they also told us when they went in for that surgery that there were fingers of the cancer that had interwoven in
Through his brain.
And so they knew at that point that there's nothing really. They said, we can try radiation and chemotherapy again, but he said no. He made that decision.
And your parents
no.
let him decide that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that a tough decision for your parents?
I'm sure it was.
Decide.
I don't know if I've ever asked my mom that question or not, but I'm sure it was. Yeah.
Wow.
But
The
he
life or
said-
death of your child would be hard to let them
Yeah.
choose, or the possible life or
Yeah.
death.
Yeah. So I remember at that point, being 12 years old. And at that point, that's when I felt the anger. And just
Did you feel like at that point, he's not going to make it?
Yeah. Yeah. I felt like, the doctors had said that we've done all that we can do.
Right.
And so I felt like, yeah, I was angry. I remember being angry that why wasn't my faith enough? Why wasn't our family's faith enough for this miracle to happen? Because I did know it was possible.
So the blame was kind of on yourself, on the family.
Yeah.
Without realizing, of
but
course, that it's
also
blame.
at God, like why aren't you doing this? I know you can.
So you had such a powerful faith when you were 11 and up to 13.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you think that you were like putting the anger toward yourselves more because you didn't want to be angry at God, for someone who has that strong of a faith?
Yeah, I think
God.
that was a big part of it. But I do remember one specific night that I was feeling anger towards myself and towards God, and knew.
And you were 13.
Yeah. Yeah. And knew that, like, that's not how I wanted to feel. Like, I felt like it wasn't helping me or the situation.
Did you feel the kind of anger that you kind of felt like you wanted to explode? You just sort of, or was it like, what did it feel like?
More, I would say, anger mixed with resentment.
Right.
And yeah,
not
blaming,
fair.
maybe.
How dare you?
Yeah, and comparison too, because I did know other people, because when you're going through cancer, you meet other people, right?
Yes,
Going
and you hear
through
their
different
stories.
types of cancer. And so had heard several stories of people that were healed from their cancer, right? And so
which gives you more hope when you have faith.
Yeah. But then that's when the comparison came in. Well, why did they get their miracle and I didn't?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's absolutely not fair.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember.
So this anger was happening when he was still alive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But knowing deep down that he wasn't going to make it. Yeah. And so I remember getting down on my knees because I didn't like that feeling.
You didn't want to be that person. Had it been going on for long enough that you felt like I'm becoming something different? Or was it more, did it feel in your memory like more of a shorter time?
It's more, I'd say probably just like a week or so. Yeah, a feeling like that.
And that had to have been so different from how you normally felt.
Yeah.
Your normal, so you noticed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was honestly, it's a blessing that you didn't let it go too long.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it goes too long and then you get used to the feeling in your heart.
That's what I was feeling like, is that if I don't figure this out, this is how I'm going to feel the rest of my life. And I don't want to feel like this. Wow.
I want you to be really paying attention to this, because I know some of you watching have that in your heart, and it's okay. actually, it's not okay because you're hurting, but it's not too late. It's not too late. And I'm hoping that your story helps you remember what it felt like before you had that pain in your heart, because you call it hate, you call it resentment, but it's pain. It's pain
Yeah.
of some kind. And so,
Yeah, and it's never too late. I think everyone comes to their own realization in their own time, which is perfect for them
yeah.
because
And
we're all on different timelines, right?
yeah, we have a journey that we need to learn and grow and figure
Yeah.
out what we're going to do in
Yeah.
our journey.
Yeah.
Okay, so this, what I love about what you're sharing is that you can do this at any time.
Mhm.
And so you felt like, I don't want to be this person.
Yeah.
So you got on your knees.
Yeah. And basically just poured my heart out to God, but also the anger, told him, this is not fair. Like, why don't I deserve a miracle? Why doesn't our family deserve this miracle of healing that I know you can do?
And did you feel like, we do this like you ask, and we do this, and we do all these things? Did you feel like that?
Yeah. I don't know if I felt like that at that point, but that's why I say the learning process, like I remember feeling that later on in my life, again, going through that in different situations, like, I've done this and this and this, you owe me.
Yeah.
You
I have
know?
been there. Yes.
Yeah, but just not wanting to let anger dominate my life and cause a feeling like that feeling of closeness that I'd always had with God. Like it was starting to feel distant because
Oh, and you noticed.
of the anger that was in my heart. And so I had been feeling the anger. I'd been feeling the disappointment. Like I wasn't trying to not feel those. I was feeling them.
And for a 13-year-old girl, any child at that age,
yeah,
that's a heavy load.
Yeah. And so I just said, I don't want to be this angry person. And I had in my conversation with God, I realized that I had to choose. I could either continue with faith and trust in him, like I'd had my whole life and had served me. I felt like I'd had a blessed, happy life, even through these trials, right?
You had felt that happiness and moments where you felt comfort.
Yeah,
okay,
for sure. And, or I could let the anger and the bitterness take over because it was. Yeah, it was.
You felt like it was starting to take over. Did you feel sounds like you felt a fear that you started noticing it, like you might be close to the edge, going over the edge. Like sometimes people feel like if I go any further, it might be hard to come back.
Yeah. Because you can't, that's one thing I've learned too, is you can't live in faith and fear or anger at the same time. You have to make a choice. You have to.
Wow.
And so I remember just choosing. It was a conscious effort that I had to make to choose my faith in God and trust in him to overcome the anger and the fear and the resentment.
How did that translate into behavior?
It didn't automatically just, okay, now I'm fine. It was every minute of everyday choice. Yeah, that no, I'm not going there.
Because he was still alive and you're still facing his death every moment.
Yeah.
And how long do you feel like it was like that? Because that feels heavy. And for those of you who are going through that or feeling those feelings and feeling like, I can't keep giving that much effort every moment of every day, because that sounds overwhelming.
Yes. But it wasn't as heavy as the anger and the resentment and the fear had been.
Very interesting.
So it was still heavy, but not as. And I could feel God's love through that, even though it was still super hard, right?
Mhm.
The process of watching him die and all that was really hard. But
So what did that look like?
um
Because he was starting to be able to
he
walk.
came
He could
home,
drag his
he
foot.
came home from the hospital, and my parents actually set up a hospital bed in their bedroom
Okay.
for him. And I don't remember the timeline of how long it took from when he came home until he passed. It was several months, but I don't remember for sure how long.
So he declined
Mhm.
slowly,
Yeah,
and you watched that decline.
yeah.
How did that feel for you
Um,
in this process of trying not to be angry? And
yeah, I think part of the thing that helped me was taking on the extra responsibility of caring for my brothers during that whole time so that my mom could focus her attention on him, because he wanted to be at home. He didn't want to be in a hospital. That was a choice, but
yeah,
he wanted to be home.
the feeling I'm getting, tell me if I'm wrong, is that you taking care of your siblings was a way to show love to your brother
Yeah.
and to your mom, because that's what you could give to help.
Yeah.
So that's why it didn't feel like a sacrifice.
Yep. That's what I could do.
Mhm.
Yep. I couldn't make him better. There's a lot of things I couldn't do, but I could do that.
Did you get to spend very much time with him?
Yeah.
So what was that like? You'd sit by his bed, or
Yeah, and he would come out. He'd like to spend until he got really, really sick. He liked to be out on the couch, in the family room in the midst of everything going on, and still tried to have people bring his schoolwork to the house. And
wow,
yeah,
he's still trying to do
Yeah.
schoolwork. Did
Yeah.
he believe he was going to live?
I never asked him that. So I don't know. I don't
That is
know.
amazing.
Yeah.
That he still was trying to improve. That takes courage. It
Yeah.
takes courage to do that.
Yeah. And my parents did an amazing job trying to keep his life as normal as possible too.
Wow. And so how did that feel? I mean, there are so many children and so many needs to be met, not just survival needs. Did it start to feel at all like, or did the kids feel like all the attention goes to my brother? We're not getting attention. I'm sure each child had a different perspective and different needs that they were going through at that time.
Yeah. And that's something that time, right, and experience has given me perspective on.
As kind of things have been revealed as you have certain talks with different siblings.
Right. And everyone did definitely experience it differently. For my youngest brother, doesn't really remember any of that because he was too little.
He was the baby.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The brother just older than him, it was really hard. I think he was 3. So he didn't know what was going on, but kind of did.
And all of a sudden his life was turned upside down, but can't understand. Yeah, 3-year-old would not understand.
So everybody definitely handled it differently. And like I say, my parents did an amazing job trying to, I don't know how they did it with 7 kids, but keep everyone's life as normal as possible, and still trying to let them do what sports they're interested in or whatever, trying to keep life as normal as possible.
Wow.
Through that too.
That's amazing, because it would have been really easy to shut down. And just kind of be, we can't do much.
Yeah. And looking back on that too, I think that is a teaching moment in and of itself, because life does go on when you
and it feels like
death
when you have any tragedy or trauma, you feel like life should stop. It should shut down. And it's almost, sometimes it's offensive that life is going on and things continue and other people are living their lives.
Like after a tragic loss like that, you think like the next day when you wake up that life should all be different now because this person is no longer here,
Yes,
right?
and the whole world, it should matter to the whole world.
Yeah, yeah, but life goes on, and that, I think, was a good thing that my parents did in trying to keep our lives as normal as possible,
Right.
helped us realize that quicker, I think, than
Help
if,
that transition and made that transition a little bit easier.
yeah, yeah.
That is,
But also talking about death a lot, and having conversations with us as a family and individually too. Like, how are you feeling? What does,
so they did talk about it.
yeah.
At-
So it was
For
never
that generation, your parents' generation, to be open and talk about
Yeah.
feelings, that's very unusual.
right. Now, the thing that we didn't do, which looking back, I think would have benefited all of us, was any kind of therapy or counseling. Because
Yes.
back then,
You didn't go to
that-
therapy unless you were really messed
Yeah.
up. Like there was like that was
Yes,
embarrassing if you went to
yes.
therapy.
yeah.
Yes.
And it wasn't even readily available either, right?
Yeah.
So
You would have been like, where would I find
Yeah.
a therapist?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is something that is available now to everyone. And even if you're not going through something tragic like the loss of a family member, or, things that we would all label tragic or
Yeah.
horrible, I think that having someone who's been trained to help guide you and help you learn how to process your feelings is so needed by everyone.
I think so
for
too.
life.
That's true. And I think that each of us have we label things differently, but we have labels for what is tragic enough
Mhm.
for us to need therapy or to need a support group.
Yeah.
And if our challenge that we're going through doesn't fit that label or doesn't fit that category, we think, no, I should be able to handle this.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case.
No.
I've had things in my life that are the most difficult things that seem super tragic, and I went through it easily. And other things that if I had labeled it would have seemed much smaller, but it just about put me down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So we're all very different and handle things differently, and that's why we all need each other, right? And hearing other people's stories can help us relate and maybe have a greater deal of empathy or compassion for
that's true.
people. Even if you're not going through the same thing, it still gives you a little taste of what someone else has gone through, right?
Yes.
And
yes. Mhm.
so
Okay, so your brother passed away.
mhm.
What happened? Like he just didn't wake up one day?
He was just at home and I think at that point, my parents had a friend that was a nurse, and so she was able to help teach them how to give him pain meds at home through an IV, because it was very, very painful at the end. And he just, during the day, I remember, I don't know if I had a sense or just had seen the decline, but thinking one day that I didn't want to go to school because I felt like, I don't remember if I felt like today's the day or just if it's coming soon, him passing. And
But for some reason, you
I
just
wanted
didn't want to leave.
to leave, but my parents said, no, we think it's best for you to go. Again, helping teach me without me understanding at the time that, like, yeah, this is a hard thing and your life still is going to go on and needs to go on, right?
It's very interesting that that's your perspective, because that's the story you tell yourself.
Yeah.
That my parents were teaching me that life goes on, when you could have told yourself the story that was awful, that
Yeah.
they made that choice.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it all goes back to that decision that I made, right?
That's true. And it's a true decision when no matter what happens, you continue to try to do it. Doesn't mean that you don't mess up. It
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
mean, let's say you make some decision or a goal. If it's a real decision, no matter how many times you mess up, you are going to keep trying.
Right. And that's not to say that after that day, I never felt anger or
Right.
resentment towards God again. I did. I just did not let that be my dominating thought or feeling.
And it didn't matter how many times you felt that, you already knew, I'm going to fight this. I'm
Yeah.
going to try to change that
Yeah.
every time.
Right. Feel it again, of course. Like,
Yeah.
I'm really mad today. Like, this is not fair. And have a day of being mad. But in the same time, letting myself feel that and experience that and act that.
Try to
taught
act it
me-
even when you're not always feeling it 100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I remember coming home from school and my parents were
And he
sitting.
had passed away.
Yeah. And he passed away while I was at school. And my parents were sitting out by the bus stop. And so I knew.
They were waiting
Yeah.
to tell you.
Yeah. So yeah. So it was.
So how did they tell you? Do you remember?
I think, like I said, I knew. So seeing them sitting there, I immediately just started crying.
And then were other of your brothers on that bus or?
No. So I was the first one home.
Okay.
And then my two youngest brothers were at home because they were too young for school. So, and then they met the other ones when they came home from school a little bit later.
And so what was that evening like? What?
Honestly, that day until like all through the funeral and everything that's when it became more of just a blur, just
It's
even though
almost
you
like
knew
you're in
it was
emotional
coming,
shock, and
the reality was just still didn't seem real,
yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but there were I'm trying to remember. There were two different girls I remember that weren't close friends. One was my age, but I don't even know if I'd ever really talked to her. I knew that's another thing about me is I was so shy as a child, like so shy. So I knew who everybody was and names and everything, but I didn't really talk to people.
Your friends were your family.
Yeah. I mean, I had
so you didn't invite friends over to your house?
Well, not especially during this time.
Right.
Because I just felt like that'd be one more strain,
right.
One more hard, too much almost. And we had cousins and our aunts and uncles and everybody that were all close to us. So
you had a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just not really outside. So when you went to school, you didn't talk to people?
Well, I did, but not like, I guess my point was she wasn't a close friend.
Okay.
She was just more of an acquaintance. Right.
Was she she was in your grade at school?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but she sent me a letter and she had had a brother pass away from a drowning accident just earlier in that same year. Oh. And so her just sending that letter and just saying, I've lost a brother. If you need to talk to someone, I'm here. And that really touched my heart. And then another girl that was a neighbor of most of that was older than me, but she wrote a note to me too. She said, I don't know how you're feeling because I haven't experienced that, but I'm here if you ever want to talk.
And how old was this girl? This is very thoughtful and
considerate
so like
for
15, children that age.
Maybe 15 or 16. And so I kept both those notes in a scrapbook.
You still have them?
Yeah, I still do.
Wow.
But through the years on hard days, those would help me. Even,
Even years later.
yeah,
Wow.
even years later. And I don't know, I don't recall that I reached out to them and said, hey, I need someone to talk to, but knowing that they were there if I did was comforting. And so I think that's something that I've learned, and that maybe people who haven't experienced that, is you don't have to say anything, because what can you say
Yeah.
to someone?
That's the hardest part,
who's
is you want
lost?
to be there for
Yeah.
someone, but what do you say?
Yeah, so sending a letter or note or text now,
Yeah.
I'm here for you. Or even just, I think what a lot of people in this world are missing these days is physical touch, and how healing that is. So even just hugging someone, not saying anything, I think can be very healing to both people.
Yeah, I think that's true. So you shared with us these beautiful letters that these girls wrote to
Mhm.
you. Were there things that you feel like sometimes people say things without thinking, or they're trying to be helpful, but they
Mhm.
say things that are really hurtful or not really appropriate? Is there anything that you would advise people or kind of let them know, you know, these are things not to say or not to do when a family is
Yeah.
going through this?
Well, I think that's what's hard, is because everyone is so different, but that's why I think you don't really need to say anything. Just, I love you, I'm thinking of you, and I'm here for you. Because yeah, I think there's things like, oh, well, they're in a better place, or at least they're not in pain anymore. Well, if somebody doesn't believe that, that's hurtful,
Yeah.
right? Like, why is not here with me a better place?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I like what you said about how everyone is different, because I've had some people tell me when they were going through a hard thing, people said these things to me like they're in a better place, and it was awful.
Yeah.
Just let me grieve. And I've
Yeah.
heard other people say that it was so helpful, but it might be helpful because it was at the right time for them. They had had enough time
Right.
to grieve. So I really like what you say about just just show love. You
Yeah.
don't really have to try to give advice or
Right.
counsel or
Right.
anything like that.
Yeah. That's, I think, moving into the territory of trying to solve someone else's problems or take on their burdens or their emotions. And that's not what we're supposed to do.
Interesting, because
Empathy.
I don't want you to hurt. So let me tell you something. They're in a better place.
Yeah.
And so now that will help you not
Right.
hurt so
But
much.
then you're trying to interfere with their journey,
Yes.
and it's their journey. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay, so here you've gone through this entire situation with your brother,
Mhm.
years of dealing with the emotions and the ups and downs,
Mhm.
and feeling like, wow, I've kind of figured out my relationship with Heavenly Father. And then years later, now you lose your dad. Jennifer was the oldest in her family. She had six, count them, six little brothers. She played with them, she helped take care of them. She was almost like their second little mother. Her little brother John, who was just 18 months younger than she was, became tragically ill with a brain tumor at the age of 10. Jennifer thought that her faith in God, combined with the faith of the rest of the family, would have the power to make John better. But that didn't happen. Her little brother died when she was only 13 years old. She didn't know it yet, but she wasn't done with her turn for tragedy. We think, in our infinite wisdom, that it needs to be somebody else's turn. Jennifer has shared a part of her story with us today, but join us next time when she shares what happened when she lost her dad. Jennifer has a unique perspective because she experienced losing her brother John to a long and drawn out illness. She also experienced a death that was sudden, unexpected, and felt like it was almost in the blink of an eye. I asked Jennifer which one was more difficult. When you join us for the second part of her story, her answer might surprise you. We're going to put on the screen some numbers for you for resources that can be helpful if you're going through something hard. And so watch for those. We'll make those available. We'll also put them in the show notes. Thank you for joining us. If you feel like you have a story to share that will lift other people and help them feel supported and feel like they're not alone, please contact me at info@teresaharding.com.